I've gotten into interviewing a lot more composers recently, and you guys are so different in the world of film, and I love that. So I get to ask your background. What got you into this? What music or scores did you like growing up that got you to kind of be a musician slash composer?
I worked as a child actor in theater and at a small professional theater not too far from where I grew up, and I really loved that aspect of storytelling. I still love theater to this day. I knew from a young age I was like I don't have what it takes to be an actor. Um, but then I started studying music, and film scoring just sort of was this perfect little fit of marrying the two together of storytelling but still making music. And that's really sort of where the idea kind of came from. And then from there, it was studying music at school and university, and then interning out in LA. So it was a natural sort of thing. It all started with me loving theater and loving telling stories, and that's sort of where it all began.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I like to hear that you have an origin in the like artistic side to get into this. Was there a score you remember that kind of stuck with you? I heard you're a Bernard Herrmann fan, so like that's a whole. I mean, that's a score
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
remember.
how much time do we have allotted for this? Because I could talk for hours on just Bernard Herrmann's catalog. The score for Vertigo, in my opinion, is one of the best film scores of all time, definitely in the top five. As a child, I remember Alan Silvestri's Back to the Future. I still think that's another one in the top three. Um, that was an incredible one, and that one I distinctly remember at a young age, um, sort of falling in love with that, and that whole just hearing that music drew me into the story. And then as I got older and started seeing, and listening to a lot of Herman scores, he really sort of solidified as my favorite. But it is a travesty that Alan Silvestri still does not have an Academy Award.
Well, yeah, don't even get me
That's
started. I'm like a big music fan, and like the fact that Bjork doesn't have a Grammy, and I'm like, what are we doing with these awards sometimes? I get so confused. No, I love to hear that. And I think we got blessed in our age group to have the late 80s, early 90s. Like, I mean, Danny Elfman scored so many of our kids' childhood kind of things. I
yeah,
just interviewed Ron Wesserman, who did the score for Power Rangers, and I'm like, I just blowing my mind of like the influence music has on us growing up. It's pretty fun to see that it impacted you enough to do this for a living.
yeah, 100%. It sure did.
No, I've kind of looked at your work and I've seen that you've been attracted a lot to action and thrillers. What draws you to making that music? Is it a rock background? What put you into this genre? Because you do it very well.
Well, thank you for that. That means a lot. Yeah, it's sort of what I cut my teeth on, coming up under my mentor Henry Jackman,
Mhm.
and being at Hans's Remote Control Productions for over a decade. That's just kind of, the big blockbuster action movies is kind of what I cut my teeth on, and really what I learned how I learned to write music for film. So yeah, I came up in that school, so it didn't have as much to do with my particular background in music. I'd studied classical and jazz, um, at university, and composition and arranging. But mainly it was just, I was very fortunate to work under some very, very good big action,
Yeah.
sort of composers. And yeah.
No, it's interesting. I think you have. I like to hear that jazz because you can hear that a little bit in your. There's a freneticness to your music sometimes that I find to be really interesting, like your extraction work and all that. So that's. I mean, the Hans connection there is also pretty badass as well. No, moving to the Citadel show, I really find this to be an interesting work. I love to see the different kind of genres that play here. It's definitely a spy series, but there's a little bit different elements here. Was that something that helped you as a composer bring this to life to maybe stand out amongst your other work that, you're like, I don't want everything to sound like the Alex Belcher experience?
Yes, Citadel it's a tough one because when I think we were wrapping up Extraction One, and Joe Russo sent me the script for Citadel. He's like, "Hey, we've got this project. Have a read and let me know what you think." And it's so many things in one. It's first of all, it's a giant film split into six parts. That's the kind of way it feels and plays, which is amazing. But it's a spy genre show. It's an action show. It's a drama. It's a sexy sort of like bantery comedic element. It has that going for it as well. So it's all of these different genres wrapped up into one, and as well as being a thriller. So when I first read the script, I honestly was like, "Oh, this is a movie for the pilot." I was like, "Oh, this has to be a movie, right? This can't possibly be a series." So the first sort of conversations, the first sort of thinking about this, how we were going to approach the music was like, okay, how do we do that? Music has to be something that acts as a through line, as a thread that ties all these different genres, all these different characters. You know, it takes place all over the world, all these different places, times, all of this. How is music going to do that? And that's really where we began in our early conversations after I read the script.
I liked you kind of led in perfectly to my next question about the globe trotting aspect of this. This is a very international feeling. Does that kind of play an influence your score? Do you want to bring in different elements, or do you kind of stay at your home base and be like, I don't know if I want to add in music from this territory?
Yeah, no, I really wanted to stay like create a musical sort of um, world for Citadel in and of itself, because Citadel exists, you know, as the organization all over the world. It's its own thing, and so we wanted to have music represent that, as opposed to the places that were um, it- scenes and characters were acting in or taking place. For us, that was a little easier to have music be that through line, that constant sort of thing. And the music does evolve over the series, but it does it in a way that sort of hands off nicely from one aspect, you know, or one style to the next.
No, I like how you referenced like Citadel is a all over the place. So you give it its own sound, its very own unique flavor. That was really interesting. Do you have a bit of freedom when you're making this? It seems like you're pretty close enough with the Russos to they're probably like, just have fun, bro. And that's what it seems like you got to have on this.
I mean, this was a truly incredible experience. I've done a lot. I've been very lucky to do a lot of projects with them, and this one was sort of the most fun in a lot of ways because we started so early. So I read the script, and their big thing was we need to set a tone. Like there's no really point of reference for a show this size and the amount of people working on it to go, this is the tone we're going for. And Joe and Anthony and David, they all had this very clear vision for what they wanted, and they wanted music to help sort of convey that to everyone else. So I started writing music after reading the script and having a couple of conversations. And a lot of that stuff ended up in the show. Some of it didn't. You know, some of it was experimentation. And then once we saw footage, we are like, oh, actually, that doesn't work. Or actually, that theme, who we thought was going to be for this character, that works really well for this character, for this place. So there was a lot of that. So yeah, it was such an amazing experience because I got to use music to sort of help set the tone of the show, or bring the tone, Joe and Anthony and David and everyone's vision sort of to screen before they'd even shot anything. So that was a lot of fun, and I felt like, you know, I was like sitting in on the writer's room or something. You know, most of my time is spent in a dark sort of studio writing music, and this felt like I got to get out into the filmmaking process a little bit for once, which was really really fun.
Yeah, that must be refreshing. You're like, I've seen enough studios in my day. Let me play on set. No, it's really interesting. You just mentioned something briefly there about you. Oh, I don't get to use that. Do you kind of make a backlog of scores and stuff you don't use that you can maybe tap into one day? Or are you kind of like, this fit this project, this lives in this world. I'm kind of done with that.
I always have, maybe not stuff that we present. You know,
Mhm.
usually that stuff we let it die,
Yeah,
and technically, I think legally the studios own it. Um,
as a studio would.
yeah, I'm not sure. You'd have to ask agents and lawyers about that, which I'm terrible at. But I'll have a lot of ideas that I maybe won't present. So mess around with something and go try it to picture and spend a week or so looking at it, and then realize, you know what, it's not this show. And I call it like the treasure chest. It's just like a little hard drive with a bunch of ideas, and it's kind of like a voice memo um,
Hmm.
thing. And every now and then I'll tap into that for ideas, but it's it's odd because rarely do those, if it wasn't good enough for one project, for me, usually I can't find a place for it. There's some sort of
Yeah.
um, disdain for it because it didn't work the first time.
Well, I just didn't know if there was going to be a vault of yours in like 50 years that was just going to be like, and here is unreleased score for this. I always love when we get to Prince, the 85th Prince
Oh
album
my
after
God.
he's passed away. And I'm like, okay, just keep doing
Well,
that.
the difference between Prince and myself, and there are many, is just the sheer amount of talent that he had is just unparalleled. So um, it's an honor to be even spoken in the same sentence with that
Well, good.
musical genius.
Good. I'm glad I
Yeah.
put you guys together. No, my last question for you is what you got going on next? Any other projects? Is there another experimentation with genres? Are you going to play around? I would love to hear you in the world of horror. I'm a horror person, and I think your thriller side could work really good in a scary movie.
Well, thank you. Yes, I've got another film that I did for Agbo that Joe and Anthony produced, called All Fun and Games. I'm not sure on the release, if they've announced the release date or
Well,
not.
let's not, just in case the
Yep.
Russos send ninjas to my house.
Yep. Um, and then I've just wrapped up Extraction 2, which will be coming out
Yes.
June 16th. So it's been a busy year. I've been very fortunate, and I'm very much looking forward to a nice little vacation. So
Well,
that's
good.
definitely
Enjoy this spring, summer vibe and maybe
yes.
crack up some good ideas for your next stuff. No, I thank you so much for speaking with me today.
No